Hi everyone, Mike Stuchiner, Master Herbalist here. And guess who's back? That's right. The Bone is back and he's better than before. All right. So here, welcome back, Bones. Looking good, man. He's looking a little bit shorter. He was having a spine issue apparently. I don't know, they had to cut a piece of his spine off. He does look a little shorter to me, but you wanna know something? He recovered and it's a fast recovery, so good for the boner. So today's topic of conversation in the video entitled Mike Stuchiner, Master Herbalist Hour, is going to be about the concept and idea of reductionist thinking and how that type of thinking has had a profound effect on the herbal medicine industry. So I think the easiest way to sum up the idea of reductionist thinking in herbal medicine is back in the, I'm just guessing again because I'd have to look up the exact year that this began. I was a part of the industry back then, but I can't recall the exact year. This was a time when what is known as standardized herbs were brought onto the US market, okay? And I've spoken about this idea and concept of standardization to herbal medicine. And I would say that, and I'm just going to repeat some things that I've said in previous videos, so just prepare yourselves for this. I believe that every form of medicine has its place, whether it's conventional Western, Chinese, Ayurvedic, Western herbalism, surgery, pharmaceuticals, detoxification protocols. It all has a place in society. It all has its place that when put into the right place, it can be very, very, very effective and can have minimal amount of negativity brought along with it, okay? Now with that said, I could tell you that the concept of standardizing herbs, it comes in a variety of different versions as an end product. I've personally spoken a lot about companies that I'm a big fan of that make what's called full spectrum extracts. And if you want to talk about by definition, full spectrum extracts are a version of standardization, okay? But when most people think of standardized herbs, they think of what I like to call the isolated standardized herb. And what that means, I'll review, even though I've mentioned it in other videos. What that basically means in a nutshell is that an herb is looked at as an individual entity. And within that herb, you have hundreds of constituents and phytochemicals found in that herb. But it's believed, when you think in terms of standardization, that one specific family of constituents are what produces one of its primary mechanism of actions and its primary results. And if you believe in the concept of synergy, which is very real, and I shouldn't even call it a concept because it's not a concept, it's reality. That's how everything works. Nothing works by itself. Everything needs something else to work. Even the human body, every chemical action has makes other things react within the body. Nothing works as an individual entity at all. And because of that, what ends up happening is that herbs are looked at in a very different manner. So when you look at what's considered an isolated standardized herb, You're taking that family of constituents, you're extracting it, concentrating it, putting it back in the mix, and now what you've ultimately got is an unbalanced herb, okay? You have something where one family of constituents, the levels are way higher in many cases than what would naturally occur within that herb if you hadn't standardized it, okay? What it's also doing is that it is giving that, it's ultimately, for lack of better terms, making that herb into what would be considered, by all definition, a drug or a natural drug. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing in all cases, because in reality, it will produce a much more specific targeted approach. If you recall in my male-female herb video, I talked about that the standardization of an herb is probably the primary thing that declares whether or not the mechanism of action and the target is going to be for men versus women, okay? And this goes along with really just any scenario. Now, there are many herbalists and ethnobotanists that very strongly believe, and they're not wrong when they believe this, okay, that when you standardize an herb, you are guaranteeing the consumer a consistent end product. There is no doubt that that is 100% true. But that is part of the reason, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow boners, that's part of the reason why I am a big believer in using full spectrum standardization, like what Gaia Herbs does and several other companies do. And the reason I'm a believer in it is because ultimately you're getting the guarantee of what's in there, but it's basically where all the constituents are concentrated together until you get that one family of constituents that's looked at as the target up to a certain level. But everything else in the plant is also being extracted at higher amounts. So you haven't changed the fact that it's still a balanced herb. And that is what many herbalists, I should say, have against the old-fashioned way of standardizing and isolating constituents within an herb. Okay? Now, I'm going to give what I consider to be one of the most profound examples in herbal medicine in the last 30 years. Now, if there are any herbalists out here who are watching or who would like to give me feedback on this, maybe there's been something since then, but I think that this is a plant that has an amazingly wide range reputation and a lot of people know about it. We've all heard, or most people I'm assuming have heard of the, the herb or the compound ephedra, okay? That comes from, the ephedra alkaloid is found in many plants in very small amounts, but probably the one that's found the highest in is the herb mawong, okay? And traditionally in Chinese medicine, it's a lung tonic. It's a lung supportive tonic. And we all know why. I mean, think about what ephedra does, okay? There are other plant medicines, which I will not mention here on this video, because I'm not trying to encourage people to do things one way or the other, and I don't want to mislead people into saying, oh, you should go get this or get that, because you'll find ephedra in it. The reality is that what we had during the 80s and I believe the early to mid 90s was a scenario where ephedra products were taken off the market. And rightfully so, they should have been. And here's why. They were taken off the market because there were people that there was a direct association with an increase of blood pressure, heart problems, amongst many other types of problems, and dehydration and kidney issues as well, I might add, okay, that people were using this standardized supplement to help increase their performance in order to be able to or excuse me, they were taking this supplement to be able to support and increase their performance in one way, shape, or another, whether it's endurance or through strength. Not for any reason, not that it had any sort of what you would call anabolic effect, because it certainly didn't. But what it did do is it was enough where you can jack your system up, for lack of better terms, and be able to get through a hard workout when you were tired. You know, if you worked a night shift, or you were a police officer or a fireman who worked a night shift, or any type of night shift person, and your group of training partners met early in the morning, you were coming straight from work after working a 10, 12-hour shift, you popped some ephedra, you had a little bit of caffeine, and bam, off you go, right? It helped increase your performance, it helped to better your performance, it helped to give you the energy that you needed, okay? And again, I have no problem with that. I'm not against any of that, okay? What the problem is that what they ultimately did was they took a wonderful herb like Ma Wong, which is perfectly safe when used as a whole herb, and they proved the concept of why reductionist thinking and standardizing something to make it into a natural drug is not always in the best interest. Now, I will say this is one example of it, and there aren't many examples of this type of scenario, quite frankly, because my whole thing is that when I look at all these other herbs, like, for example, if you go on the market, you find a standardized rhodiola, a standardized ashwagandha, and so on and so forth, or I should say an isolated standardized rhodiola, ashwagandha, or any other herb. The reality is that none of those plant medicines are really going to have anywhere near the detrimental effects that something like ephedra had on most people, okay? The end result really is that they're simply, the herb company is simply trying to give you what would be considered one version of a guarantee that what you're buying, you're guaranteed that you are in fact getting. And that's where I find the positive in these isolated standardized herbs. This is the concept of where reductionism has had a profound effect on the herbal medicine industry, because ultimately what you have found is that there are good aspects of it and there are bad aspects of it. Like I said, ephedra and what they did with that alkaloid absolutely was considered a stigma and a negative effect on the herbal medicine industry, okay? But the other aspect of where it gives a more targeted approach, with other herbs, and more importantly, where it's one version of a guarantee that you're getting what you are paying for, is a wonderfully positive aspect to it. And again, I'll say it again and again and again and again, is the idea that everything has its place, okay? If I were a college student, or I was a graduate student, even better, okay, and I was studying for exams, and I wanted to use the herb Bacopa, and I only had a week to be able to get all this information in my head, I personally would probably use a full spectrum or an isolated standardized version of Bacopa for the week prior and then the week of, to get a slightly faster and a more targeted approach to being able to jam all that information into my brain. Now, of course, I would use other herbs as well at the same time, but I'm just showing you where this is a wonderful positive example of standardizing herbs and why it plays a certain role and why there is, a place for all these things in herbal medicine. Okay, guys, so I know in the herbal medicine world, this is a pretty big topic, because you have so many different companies who produce different end result products. And I also know that there's a lot of old school companies, like, for example, Christopher's Herbals, that believes in no real standardization of any kind of their products, even their extracts. Their extracts are basically whole herb extracts that are either as a powdered capsule or as a tincture, and it's basically just the whole herb that's been chopped up, soaked in either alcohol, glycerin, or alcohol and water, or whatever. Okay, That's a real old school way of thinking. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still very effective, and it works really, really, really well. But I believe as a master herbalist myself that, and a graduate of that school, that while I agree with them 100%, I also think that in modern times when we have the ability and the technology to be able to make a safe, effective end result product with some of the technology we have that could potentially give us more effective results, I see nothing wrong with that. But I should not be the only one talking. Let's ask Bones what he thinks. Bones, what do you think? Standardized or not standardized? Thumbs up? I see his hand. You guys can't see his hand. Goes thumbs up. Thumbs up to full spectrum standardized herbs. Okay, guys, Mike's Tuciner, Master Herbalist. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have questions, leave them below. Till next time. Adios. Boner, adios.